Now it's recording. Hi, Angel. How are you doing this week?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing great. I'm so glad I could see you today. So kind of talking about the last weeks, I know we haven't seen each other in a bit. Is there any like significant like events that have happened, any thoughts or behaviors that you would maybe want to talk about?
We have our, I guess it's like where your boss judges you and like ranks you on how you're doing in your job. We have those coming up. So that's caused a lot of stress just based on performance reviews and numbers and raises and all of that. So that's been kind of in the back of my head with everything for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And did you say this already happened or it's like going to happen, the performance review?
It, it's going to happen before the end of October. So I don't have a date, which is also another part of it.
Yeah.
I don't know when it's going to happen. I just know that it's going to happen.
That
So
can be hard too, just like knowing like whether they're going to leave positive feedback, negative feedback over the evaluation. Are you somebody that takes criticism pretty well, or how do you feel about criticism?
I would say it depends on how it's delivered.
Mm.
Uh, Depending on how it's said and if it's said in like a derogatory way or not, I think, that makes a huge difference. And um, as long as there's more good than bad, I typically take it okay. But I don't really know. Sometimes I take it really bad, and then sometimes I'm okay with it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Criticism is like can be really hard to take sometimes, and I do agree with you. The way it's delivered a lot of times can make it better or worse. And I kind of want to continue to talk about this with you, but I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the homework last week with the dysfunctional thought record. How did you feel about doing that?
So at first, I really struggled with it. I felt like I was overthinking it a lot, trying to fill it out with every single thought I was having. And then I kind of gave myself a little bit of grace with that and backed off. Um, and I just used it at the end of the day. And I would kind of think of the biggest thought that took up like most of my day. Um, and look at it from that perspective of it's not so much a proactive response, but at least I'm doing it.
Yeah,
Uh,
definitely.
so, I mean, I didn't probably do it the way that I should have or as much as I should have, but I did do it.
And sometimes like when it comes to like mental health, there's no like black or white, it's not no wrong way, no right way of doing anything, just sitting down and attempting it, something like that can be helpful. Even in small ways or big ways that can be helpful. So I'm glad like you were able to like take the time and to try it out. So I'm glad to hear that feedback from you. And kind of like going back to what you were saying with the whole evaluation with your boss. I was kind of hoping we could talk about that more in today's session and kind of weigh out the costs and benefits of thoughts that you're having around it. Um, and also kind of looking at like the evidence for the thoughts and evidence against the thoughts that you're having with it. Would you be okay with that for this session?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, perfect. So I'll go ahead and share my screen with you. Okay. All right. So I understand that you said like you're gonna have an evaluation like at the end of October with your boss. What kind of thought are you having like around that whole situation?
Um, Honestly, as dumb as it sounds, I keep thinking I'm going to get fired. Like
Okay.
I would say that's honestly a big thought for me right now.
Yeah.
Uh, just stressed about that, I guess.
Yeah. Worried about like getting fired potentially in the evaluation, seeing what she has to say. Um, yeah, that sometimes thoughts like that can just happen. When we have things like these occurring. Now, kind of looking at this thought from like an objective point of view, what do you think would be the cost of having this behavior? Is there any or the benefit. We could talk about that too. Whichever one you can think of first.
It costs me a lot. So I'm assuming that the cost is like more of like the negative side of this.
Yes, yes.
Uh,
Like the negative aspects of having the thought.
uh, for this thought, I would say it's taking up a lot of my time, like a lot of my day. And anytime I make any small mistake, I keep thinking that she's just going to add that to the list of things. So I would probably put it at an 8.
An 8, yeah. Okay. Um, and when you're having those thoughts too, they can feel like they're real at times too. So putting it at 8 makes sense because it does feel like it's a real thought and it could potentially happen. Would you say that there's any other like costs to having this thought? And it could be like a behavior you're doing because of this thought too, like a negative behavior because of the thought.
I would say I'm really stressed out and I'm very snippy. Just because I am like so hyper focused on doing well that I get stressed out if anything goes sideways.
Yeah.
Uh, so I would say like my behavior with coworkers is changing as well.
Yeah. Would you say like you're pretty hard on yourself, like when you make mistakes too? Like is making mistakes kind of like harder now because of like this evaluation coming up?
Yeah, I mean, they were hard before. I would always just kind of take it as I'm failing and or I'm stupid for making this mistake. And so now I feel like the cost, or I guess not the cost, but like the weight of these mistakes is a little bit more, even if it's not.
Yeah.
Just with the evaluation coming up, I keep thinking like, oh, she's looking at this and she's going to grade me on that. And this is going to be fresh in her mind. Like she's going to forget
Yeah.
about all the great things I do. She's just going to focus on the negative things.
Yeah. And it can be easy to think that too sometimes, because it's kind of a situation where it could be a little anxiety inducing, not knowing exactly what they're going to say. Would you say that there's any benefits to having this thought that you're having? Like any good coming from this thought of I'm going to get fired?
Not really. I
Yeah.
mean, I can't think of anything good. I would say I'm a little more careful with my work. Um, Maybe that could be a positive with it, but even still, like the motivator behind it is still pretty negative. So
Yeah, so it's like you might be doing like you might not be like making as many mistakes, but it's more of like because of anxiety around making mistakes and things like that. So it's not necessarily like a positive thing.
right, right.
And kind of holding on to that too. To the thought of I'm gonna get fired. What would you say is like the evidence for that thought?
I don't know if there is evidence for that.
Yeah.
I mean, other than the fact that our budget is, you know, frozen in the department, but that really doesn't have anything to do with me specifically.
Now, have you ever like had an evaluation before at work, or is this like your first time having one?
This is my first one. Um, and just with how much like I have poured into this company, it feels pretty big because they are paying for my school. Um, so it just feels like if this goes bad, then I'm gonna lose a lot with it.
Yeah.
So I think that's why it's so stressful.
It sounds like you care like a lot about this job.
Yeah, I definitely do. I really like my job.
Yeah. Um, and has your boss like kind of looking more at like evidence for the thought? Has your boss like ever had any like negative things to tell you before about your job performance?
No, she's corrected me on stuff, you know, as I was like learning, and I kind of took it as an insult or kind of took it as a negative thing when in reality she was just doing her job.
Yeah. And how did she go about like kind of giving this like feedback to you? Was it because I know you were saying like it depends how like feedback's delivered to me, whether like I'm accepting of it or not. Do you feel like she gave you that feedback in a good way?
Yeah, I think she did it in a pretty decent way. I mean, I don't think anyone likes being told that they're doing things wrong,
Yeah.
but she was nice about it, and I apologized, and she just said it's part of learning, so she didn't make a huge deal about it.
Okay. Yeah. And is this the same lady that's going to be evaluating your performance like at the end of October too?
Yeah.
Okay. That's good to hear though. Like, before she's given you feedback, the delivery of it was not super negative. Seems like she was kind of like nice about it.
Yeah, she was.
Now, looking at evidence against the thought, if you were to look at like I shouldn't get fired, kind of looking at the opposite, what would you say is evidence against this thought?
I have the highest productivity rate on my team, so I'm pretty much I see the most clients in a week
Wow.
compared to my staff or the other staff.
That's really good. And like, has it been like this for a while? Like, have you been like the most productive like for a while too?
Yeah, since I've started, I've had the highest, if not one of the highest numbers.
Wow. That's awesome to hear. That is honestly like a great thought again, or a great evidence against this thought. Is there any other evidence you can think of against this thought?
All my clients really like me. You
Okay.
know, I have really good rapport with everyone. I feel like I have overall a really good relationship with all my coworkers. I'm respectful. I'm always on time. I'm always available if emergencies arise. So I think I'm a pretty decent worker.
Okay, yeah. That's really great to hear. It seems like, based off what you told me, you're doing pretty well at work and the highest productivity, getting like a bunch of clients. Like that is awesome to hear. Um, Now kind of coming to like the judge's verdict on this thought, do you think that this is a fair or an accurate thought to have?
Not really. Looking at the evidence and I guess the positives to the situation, it doesn't really defend the fact that I will get fired, right? It kind of focuses more on the other side of it that I probably won't be fired. Um, and I do my job well, and I think that's all you can really ask of an employee. So I don't think, I mean, obviously it could happen. It happens all the time, right? People get fired, but I guess overall the evidence doesn't really support the idea that that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, it sounds like it too, based off of what you're telling me. Now, if you were to come up with an alternative thought to the situation, what would that thought be?
I guess, it's more of like a complicated, longer thought, but I do really well in my job. And if there is any criticism, it'll probably just be things I can do better. It doesn't have to be 0 to 100. Like, it doesn't have to mean that I'm going to get fired.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really great way of just kind of reframing that thought in kind of a more realistic way based off of like talking about all the evidence behind those thoughts. Let me go ahead and stop sharing my screen. Okay. So, now how would you say you're kind of feeling like after today's session?
I feel a lot better. I don't feel like my heart rate's kind of decreased. I feel a little like my shoulders feel less heavy. I don't feel as, I guess, I don't feel like I'm drowning in that constant stress of like I'm gonna get fired.
Yeah. That's really great to hear that, after kind of like talking about everything, reevaluating the situation, we could bring a little bit of clarity and make you feel a little bit better about the situation. And I was wondering for homework for the week, if you'd be interested in doing that cost and benefit worksheet throughout the week, and I could send that to you as well.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful, especially with not knowing when this is happening. I think that would be good to have on hand for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think so too. Is there anything else you'd want to talk about in today's session before we leave off?
No, I think that was it. That was kind of the most intense thing in the past week. So,
Okay, perfect. Well, I guess I'll see you the same time next week. Does that work?
yep, that's perfect.
All
Thank you.
right, I'll see you then. Bye.
Yeah.